Hi everyone, I'm going to show you how to make a very simple scissor case. This scissor case has 3 pockets for your large scissors, for your pinking shears, and there's the one at the bottom. You can put a rotary cutter or small scissors. It is actually long enough to put a full-length pair of scissors in the bottom as well. What you're going to need is 1 piece of A4 paper and then 2 pieces of fabric. You can use the same fabric, you can use contrasting fabric, but 2 pieces of fabric that have been cut to exactly the same size as the A4 piece of paper. You'll want to think about your fabric in terms of what goes on show. So once this is all folded and stitched together, 1 piece of fabric is going to be blocked in this section, and then you've got the contrasting fabric either side, and then if I turn it over you can see the bulk of the fabric is on the back. What we're going to do first is you take your A4 piece of paper, and we're going to start with the shorter end, and we're going to just fold this over as though you're making a paper plane, and just bring that corner down so it now looks like that. The next thing you're going to do is take the corner that you've just folded and you're going to bring that back up to this edge here. The last thing you're going to do is take this corner, lift up your flap that you've just created, and you're going to fold that under, matching up this diagonal line. And then you can fold that flap back. So that's essentially what we're going to make in paper form, but in fabric form. But you can see the way the paper has been folded. If you want, if you've had a practice, you can cut a rounded edge on the top, because this piece of paper is essentially your pattern template. So you can round off the edge and then match that onto your fabric. The other thing you can do if you want is cut off this bottom section if you didn't want a pointy edge, but again you'll have to match that onto the fabric. But I can show you how to get rid of this point if you don't want this on your fabric. But that's what we're going to make in fabric form. With the fabric, before we start sewing, take your shorter edge of your fabric and fold over about 1/4 inch wrong sides together. So it's going to look like that, wrong sides together. You're going to do this for both pieces of fabric. Next, place 1 piece of fabric right side facing up. Place the other piece of fabric on top, right side facing down, so that both your right sides are together. You can use clips to just match up those lines all the way around. What you want is both folded edges to be at the, I'm using it on the bottom, but you want both folded edges to be matched up together. What we're going to do is stitch from one corner folded edge all the way up to the top, across the top, and then back down the other side. We're not going to stitch this bottom section. I'm going to pause the video. I'm just going to do a running stitch round and then we'll fold this out the other way. You can backstitch at the bottoms. That will just help to reinforce the stitch. I use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but you can use a bigger allowance if you want. I've got a 1/4 inch foot, which is why I always use a 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to pause the video and I'm just going to run a stitch round. So I've now done a 1/4 inch seam all the way along, and I have not stitched the bottom folded edge, but I did backstitch at the end just to keep that in place. I also noticed I didn't cut my A4 very well, so it's a bit uneven at the edges, but that's not a problem. The next thing we're going to do is at the corners, we're just going to clip those corners. It just means that when we fold it out, it's going to be a crisper corner. So you just cut not too close to the stitches, but as close as you're comfortable. Like that. The next thing I'm going to do is fold it the right way out. And you're going to need either a pencil or I like to use just an old knitting needle. And you just want to, I just use a plastic needle. I'm just going to poke those corners out very gently. If you push too much, you will just puncture the stitch. But you just want to have a nice crisp corner for both. Now, if you have an ironing board handy, you can go and press this so that it lies nice and flat. If, like me, I can never be bothered to get my ironing board out unless I really have to, what you can do is you can just roll with your fingers and roll that seam, and that will start to bring that seam out really nice and crisp. You can see on the ends here it's bubbled a bit, so if you roll with your fingers, it just eases out that seam. Plus the heat of your fingers will also help to press the corners quite well and the edges as well. Sometimes you have to lick your fingers. So you can either go and iron and press that nice and flat, or you can do what I'm doing and just rolling it. So what you should be left with is an open end that's folded in. And the reason we fold it is because we can now stitch that closed. On this first, let me just get it. On this one, I haven't top stitched here on the edges. So it's up to you if you want to top stitch, or you can just leave them as they are. For this video, I am actually going to top stitch because I've seen others create it and the top stitching does look quite nice. So I'm just going to run through on my machine and I'm just going to top stitch all the way around, and I'm going to also stitch that opening shut as well. So I've now gone along and I have top stitched all the way around, and I have now sealed that open end. We're now going to replicate what we did with the paper. So I'm just going to turn it that way up. You can see this in the camera. You take your first corner and you're going to fold that down. If you have the ironing board, you can press this. And then you're going to fold back up. And then what you can do is just clip that in place. So it's not going to go anywhere, although if you iron it, then it's going to hold its line. And then take your bottom corner, lift it, and just match it up on that side. Let me take my clip out so I can do that section. And you can go to your ironing board and you can just press that down if you like. Now, with this corner piece, I'm going to slide it up. If you want, you can either leave that as a pointy corner and just stitch that down, or if you like, if you just open it up slightly, you can fold that at this point and then just tuck that back in, and it will give you just a flattened edge. But just bear in mind that that is quite a few layers of fabric now, so you've got to hope that your machine will sew through thick fabrics. I'm using a 201, so I know that my machine will go through all those thick fabrics. So it's up to you how you want to do that. What you want to do now though is clip it all down, If you've used an ironing board and pressed the seams and pressed these folds, it will make it easier running through the machine. I just don't. So I'm just going to clip down. And then the last thing to do is to run a top stitch all the way, well, actually start from that corner and just run a top stitch down on this side, round, either if you've created a flat edge, or like I've done on this one, or if you want to keep it as a pointy edge, like this one, you just run your stitch down to the point and then back up on the other side. And then remember to back stitch at the beginnings and the ends of your fabric, and it will just hold it all in place. So I'm just going to do that now. I've just run out of thread, so I just need to change the bobbin, and then I'll show you what it looks like at the end. So I've just gone round and I've just top stitched all the way down, either down to a point if you're doing yours on a point, or through those folds, and then back up the other side. You can see that it's one colour on one side, and then you've got the contrast on those. You can then start with all your scissors in. Like that, and these are my fabric scissors, so they're quite big as well. What you can do, if you like, this top corner you can actually fold down, and you can either put a cam snap in there, or you can stitch a piece of elastic and have a little button there if you like. Someone's also recently told me that these they don't have to be scissor holders. They're actually good as cutlery holders if you're out in the garden barbecuing, or as kind of even on the table. So they can be used for multiple uses. It's up to you. And then because you've used fabric, you can wash them as well. Okay.